The Vampire King had not knelt in 600 years, yet here he was, lowering himself to the marble floor before a blind woman who had just whispered the impossible. Lucien Drakenthorn stood at the center of the ancient throne room beneath Prague, surrounded by his court of immortals, their pale faces turned toward him with expressions ranging from shock to outrage. His knees touched stone for the first time since the fall of Constantinople, and the sound echoed through the cavernous space like a death knell. The woman before him trembled, her unseeing eyes wide with confusion, one hand still pressed against her chest as if trying to understand what she had heard moments ago when she had accidentally touched him. "My lord, this is madness," hissed Cassandra, his second in command, her white hair cascading over shoulders draped in crimson silk. "She is human, nothing more." Lucien ignored her. His dark eyes, the color of wine held to candlelight, remained fixed on the fragile creature before him. Fiona Sawyer. The name had been whispered to him by his guards when they brought her down to the Undercity, found wandering the old tunnels that connected the modern Prague to the ancient vampire realm below. She wore simple clothing, jeans and a sweater, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Her eyes, though sightless, seemed to search for him in the darkness she lived in perpetually. "What did you hear?" Lucien asked, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. He spoke in English, having detected her American accent moments before. Fiona's hand shook as she lowered it from her chest. "I don't understand. I just got lost. I was touring the old city and I took a wrong turn and there were stairs and—" "What did you hear when you touched me?" Lucien interrupted, rising slowly to his full height. He was tall, imposing, with the bearing of a king and the beauty of something otherworldly. His skin was pale as moonlight, his hair the white of fresh snow despite the fact he had been turned at 33. He wore black tailored perfectly to his form, every inch the ruler he had been for over 6 centuries. The blind woman bit her lip, and Lucien found himself captivated by the gesture, by the warmth of blood flowing so close to the surface of her skin. "A heartbeat," she whispered. "I heard a heartbeat. But that's impossible because I touched your chest." And she paused, understanding dawning on her face. "You're dead, aren't you? I mean, not dead, but undead. That's why everyone here feels so cold and still." Murmurs erupted through the court. Lucien raised one hand and silence fell immediately. "How can you hear such things?" he asked, stepping closer. Fiona didn't retreat, though he could hear her own heart racing, smell the adrenaline in her blood. "I've been blind since birth," she said quietly. "My other senses compensated. I can hear things others can't. Heartbeats, blood flow, the tiny sounds bodies make just by existing. It helps me navigate the world." She turned her head slightly, as if trying to locate him by sound alone. "But you don't make those sounds. None of you do. You're all silent in ways humans aren't." Except? Lucien prompted. "Except when I touched your chest, just for a second I heard a heartbeat. Faint, so faint I almost thought I imagined it, but it was there." Her voice grew stronger, more certain. "You have a heartbeat, a real one. How is that possible?" Lucien turned away from her, facing his court. Every vampire in the room stared at him with expressions of disbelief. In 600 years of undith, his heart had not beaten once. It was the nature of their kind. The heart stopped, the body died, and the curse of immortality animated what remained. No vampire had a heartbeat. It was simply impossible. "She lies," Cassandra said, her voice sharp. "I don't think she does," Lucien replied softly. He looked at his oldest friend Marcus, who had been by his side for 4 centuries. "What does the old lore say about hearts that begin to beat again?" Marcus, white-haired and scholarly even in death, paled further if such a thing were possible. "My lord, those are children's tales. Myths we tell fledglings. Tell me anyway." The ancient vampire shifted uncomfortably. "The lore speaks of true mates, of a bond so profound that the curse itself begins to reverse. It is said that when a vampire finds their destined match, their heart remembers what it was to live." He glanced at Fiona, who stood very still, listening to every word. "But such bonds are spoken of only in the oldest texts. I know of no vampire in recorded history who has actually experienced such a thing." "Until now," Lucien said quietly. The implications crashed through the throne room like a wave. A true mate bond meant more than love, more than desire. It meant completion. It meant that after 6 centuries of existence, Lucien Drakenthorn had finally found the one soul in all the world that called to his own. And she was human, fragile, mortal blind, and absolutely terrified. "I want to go home," Fiona said, her voice small but steady. "I don't understand what's happening, but I want to leave, please." Lucien felt something unfamiliar stir in his chest. Guilt? Protectiveness? Both were foreign to him, a king who had commanded armies and destroyed rivals without hesitation. "I'm afraid that's not possible. Not yet. Are you kidnapping me?" Her fear sharpened, and with it Lucien felt an answering pain in his own chest. The thought of causing her distress was suddenly unbearable. No, he said quickly, moving to her side. She tensed when he approached, and he found himself moderating his movements, making more noise than necessary so she could track him. I am protecting you. From what? From those who would use you against me. It was the truth. The moment word spread that Lucien Drakenthorn had found a potential true mate, every rival, every enemy, every ambitious vampire in Europe would descend upon Prague seeking to capture or kill her. She had become the most valuable and vulnerable creature in the supernatural world the instant her hand had touched his chest. Fiona absorbed this information with remarkable composure. So I'm a prisoner. You are a guest under my protection, Lucien corrected. There is a difference, not from where I'm standing. Despite the gravity of the situation, Lucien felt his lips curve slightly. She had spirit, this blind woman who had stumbled into his world. Allow me to offer you comfortable quarters, food, anything you require. Give me time to ensure your safety, and I swear on my honor as king that you will be free to choose your own path. Your honor as king, she repeated, her tone skeptical. You're actually a king? Of what? Of all vampires in Central Europe, Cassandra interjected coldly. You stand before Lucien Drakenthorn, sovereign of the bloodlines, keeper of the ancient covenants, and lord of the Undercity. You would do well to show proper respect. Fiona turned toward the sound of Cassandra's voice. I would do well to wake up from this nightmare. Vampires aren't real. This is insane. Yet you recognized what we are the moment you touched us, Lucien said gently. Your gift for hearing tells you the truth, does it not? We do not breathe as humans do. Our hearts do not beat. We are the creatures your kind have feared for millennia, and we are very real. He watched her process this, saw the moment acceptance settled over her features. She was intelligent, this Fiona Sawyer. She would not deny the evidence her own senses provided. Fine, she said at last. I'll stay for now. But I want answers, and I want to understand what's happening to me. To us, if there even is an us. There is, Lucien said with absolute certainty. Though I confess I understand it no better than you do. He gestured to one of his guards, a young vampire named Victor. Escort Miss Sawyer to the eastern wing. Give her the suite overlooking the garden. Ensure she has everything she needs. My lord. Victor bowed, then approached Fiona carefully. May I guide you, miss? Fiona hesitated, then nodded. She allowed Victor to take her arm, and Lucien watched as she was led from the throne room, his eyes tracking her until she disappeared through the archway. The moment she was gone, chaos erupted. This is madness, Lucien, Cassandra said, stalking toward him. A human? A blind human? This will be seen as weakness by every court in Europe. Let them see what they wish, Lucien replied coldly, his earlier gentleness evaporating. I am still king. My word is still law. For how long? The challenge came from Lord Dimitri, an ancient vampire who ruled the bloodlines in the eastern territories. You show vulnerability now. You knelt before a mortal. The other kings will not overlook such a display. Lucien turned to face Dimitri fully, and his power rolled through the room like thunder. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of 600 years of absolute authority. I knelt before my mate. There is no shame in that, only recognition of a bond that transcends our cursed existence. Any who challenge me on this matter will find themselves facing the same fate as the last fool who questioned my rule. The reminder of Lord Constantine's execution 50 years prior sent a ripple of unease through the assembled vampires. Lucien had torn his rival apart personally, a brutality that had cemented his reputation as both just and merciless. What will you do with her? Marcus asked quietly, ever the voice of reason. I don't know, Lucien admitted, the confession costing him. But I will protect her with everything I have. Spread the word through all the territories. The woman is under my personal protection. Any vampire who harms her or attempts to use her will answer to me directly. And if she chooses to leave? Cassandra asked. If she rejects the bond? The question struck something deep in Lucien's chest, that impossible beating heart. Then I will let her go, he said quietly. But not until I know she will be safe. Not until I understand what this bond means and how to protect her from the consequences of it. The court session dissolved shortly after, vampires drifting away in small groups, no doubt to gossip and scheme. Lucien remained in the throne room, staring at the spot where Fiona had stood, remembering the sound of his own heartbeat echoing in his ears. For 600 years he had been a king. Powerful, feared, respected. He had commanded armies, negotiated treaties, and executed justice without hesitation. He had lived through the rise and fall of empires, had seen the world transform from medieval fiefdoms to the modern age. Nothing surprised him anymore, nothing moved him, until a blind woman had touched his chest and heard the impossible. 3 days passed in a strange, suspended tension. Fiona remained in her suite, and Lucien found himself drawn to her quarters repeatedly, though he never entered without invitation. He would stand outside her door, listening to her move about the rooms, hearing her soft humming as she explored her new environment by touch and sound. Victor reported that she was adjusting remarkably well, that she had mapped the entire suite in the first day, and was now requesting access to more of the Undercity. She asked questions constantly, wanting to understand the vampire world she had stumbled into. On the fourth night, Lucien finally knocked on her door. "Come in," she called, and he entered to find her standing by the window, her fingers trailing over the stone sill. She had changed into clothes provided by his staff, a soft dress that fell to her knees, simple but elegant. Her dark hair was loose around her shoulders. "How did you know it was me?" he asked. She smiled slightly. "You walk differently than the others, more weight, more purpose, and you're the only one whose presence makes the air feel heavier somehow. Like the room holds its breath when you enter." "Poetic," he observed, moving to stand beside her. "Though perhaps accurate. I've been told I have a commanding presence." "That's one word for it," she said dryly. "Oppressive is another." Lucien found himself almost smiling again, an expression that felt foreign on his face. "You are remarkably comfortable insulting me for someone who is, as you said, a prisoner." "Guest," she corrected, throwing his own words back at him. "Under your protection, remember?" "I remember." He looked out the window at the underground garden below, a marvel of vampire engineering that allowed plants to grow without natural sunlight. "Are you comfortable here? Do you have everything you need?" "I have plenty of things," Fiona said. "What I don't have is understanding. You said you'd give me answers. Ask your questions." She turned toward him, and even though her eyes couldn't see him, he felt the weight of her attention. "Why did your heart beat when I touched you?" "I don't know," Lucien admitted. "The lore speaks of true mates, of bonds that transcend death itself. But such things are myth, or so I believed." "True mates," she repeated softly. "Like soulmates, more than that. A true mate bond is said to complete a vampire, to restore something of what was lost when they died. It is the rarest of all supernatural phenomena, so rare that most vampires live their entire immortal existence without encountering it. And you think I'm your true mate?" Her voice was skeptical. "We don't even know each other." "The bond is not about knowing," Lucien said. "It is about recognition. Your soul calls to mine in a way nothing else has in 600 years of existence." He paused, considering his next words carefully. "I can feel you, Fiona Sawyer. Even now, standing beside you, I am aware of your heartbeat, your breath, the warmth of your blood. But more than that, I feel your emotions, your fear, your confusion, your stubborn determination to understand. It is as if a door has opened in my chest that was closed for centuries." Fiona was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached out, her hand searching the space between them until her fingers found his arm. Through the fabric of his shirt, he felt the warmth of her touch, and his heart responded with a single, powerful beat. She gasped softly. "There, I felt it. Your heart just beat." "Yes." His voice was rough. "This is real," she whispered. "This is actually real. Are you frightened?" She considered the question seriously. "I should be. I'm in an underground city full of vampires, bound to a king by some mystical connection I don't understand. But honestly, I'm more curious than scared." Her fingers tightened on his arm. "What happens now? Do we just accept this bond and that's it? Do I become a vampire? Do you become human? How does this work?" "I don't know," Lucien admitted again. "The lore is unclear. Some texts suggest the bond must be consummated willingly by both parties. Others speak of trials and sacrifices. But all agree on one thing. A true mate bond is dangerous, especially for the mortal half of the pair." "Dangerous how?" "You are human, fragile. The bond makes you a target for anyone who wishes to control or harm me." He covered her hand with his own, marveling at the contrast between her warmth and his cold skin. "There are vampire lords who would torture you to force my compliance. Others who would kill you simply to weaken me. And some who would turn you without permission, believing that making you immortal would strengthen their own position in my court." Fiona absorbed this soberly. "So what you're saying is I'm safest away from you." The word struck him like a physical blow. "Perhaps, though the thought of being parted from you is..." He stopped, surprised by the strength of his own reaction. "Unbearable?" she suggested quietly. "Yes." She turned fully toward him, releasing his arm to reach up with both hands. Her fingers found his face and she began to trace his features gently, learning him by touch. Lucien stood perfectly still, allowing her exploration, though every point of contact sent that strange awareness spiraling through him. "You're beautiful," she murmured. "I can feel it. Perfect bone structure, smooth skin, strong jaw." Her fingers moved to his hair, threading through the white strands. "This is really white? They said it was white." "Yes. All vampires lose their color when they turn. Hair, skin, even our eyes fade to paler versions of what they were." "How old were you when you died?" 33. I was a warlord in the Carpathian Mountains, leading my armies against the Ottoman expansion. I was betrayed by one of my own generals, left to die on the battlefield. A vampire named Seraphine found me and offered me a choice: death or immortality. I chose to live, though I did not understand the cost. Do you regret it? No one had ever asked him that question. There have been centuries where I regretted it deeply. The isolation of immortality, the endless nights, the loss of everyone I once loved. But there have also been moments of profound beauty, of experiences no mortal could comprehend. He caught her wrist gently, holding her hand against his cheek. And now there is you. You don't know me, she said. But there was less conviction in her voice than before. I know that you are brave. You could have collapsed into hysteria when you learned what we are. But instead you adapted, asked questions, sought understanding. I know that you are independent. Victor tells me you refused assistance once you learned the layout of your rooms. I know that you are kind because you thank the servants who bring you food, something most vampires would never consider doing for those they see as beneath them. He turned his head slightly, pressing his lips to her palm. I know that your touch brings my dead heart to life, and that is a miracle I did not believe possible. Fiona's breath caught, and Lucien heard her heart rate increase. This is crazy, she whispered. Yes, I live in Boston. I have a job, a life, friends who are probably wondering where I am. I know I can't just stay here forever in some underground vampire kingdom. I know that too. Then what do we do? It was the question Lucien had been asking himself for 4 days. We take time to understand the bond. We learn about each other. We determine if this connection is something we both want to pursue. He released her hand, stepping back to give her space. And then, when we understand what we face, we make a choice. Together, what if I choose to leave? The question hurt, but Lucien answered honestly. Then I will ensure you return to your life safely, with no memory of this place or what occurred here. It is within my power to erase the supernatural from your mind. You could do that? She sounded unsettled. Just take my memories? I could. But I would not do so without your permission. The choice would be yours. Fiona was quiet for a long time, and Lucien simply stood there, giving her the space to think. Finally she spoke. I want to understand this. The bond, your world, what this all means. But I need time and I need honesty. No more secrets, no more vague references to danger without explanation. If I'm going to make an informed choice, I need all the information. Agreed, Lucien said immediately. Ask me anything and I will answer truthfully. All right then. She crossed her arms, a gesture of determination. Tell me everything about what it means to be a vampire's true mate, and don't leave anything out. They talked through the night. Lucien explained the nature of the vampire curse, how it transformed humans into immortal predators, how the need for blood was both sustenance and addiction. He told her about vampire society, the courts and territories, the laws that governed their kind. He explained the hierarchy that placed him at the apex of Central European vampire politics, and the constant maneuvering of those who sought his throne. When he spoke of true mates, he shared everything the ancient text revealed. The bond would grow stronger with time and proximity. It would allow them to sense each other's emotions, to know when the other was in danger. If consummated fully, if Fiona accepted him completely, the bond could restore his mortality or grant her immortality, though which would occur was unknown. So we could both end up human, she asked. You could actually die? It is possible. Some texts suggest the bond gives the vampire a choice: remain immortal or reclaim mortality to be with their mate as an equal. And you would choose that? You would give up 600 years of immortality? Lucien considered the question carefully. A week ago, I would have said no without hesitation. Immortality is power, and power has been my purpose for centuries. But now, he looked at her, this blind woman who had turned his existence upside down. Now I find myself wondering what 600 years of life are worth without something real to fill them. Fiona reached out, finding his hand and lacing her fingers through his. I'm not saying I'm ready to accept this bond or make any huge decisions. But I think I'd like to get to know you, Lucien Drakenthorn. The real you. Not just the Vampire King. I'm not certain there's a difference, he admitted. Then let's find out. The following weeks fell into an unexpected rhythm. Lucien cleared his schedule of all but the most essential duties, delegating to Cassandra and his other lieutenants. He spent his nights with Fiona, showing her the Undercity, teaching her about his world. She was endlessly curious, asking questions that often surprised him with her insight. She wanted to know about vampire culture, about how they governed themselves, about the ethics of feeding on humans. She challenged him when his answers were too autocratic, forced him to examine assumptions he had held for centuries. In return, she told him about her life, about growing up blind in a world designed for the sighted, about the adaptive technologies she used, about her work as a music therapist helping children with disabilities. She told him about her family, her mother who had died when she was young, her father who had remarried and started a new family, about feeling like an outsider even in her own life. "I've always been different," she said one night as they sat in the underground garden, surrounded by night-blooming flowers that filled the air with perfume. "Not just because I'm blind, but because I experience the world differently. I hear things, feel things that others don't notice. It's made me a good therapist, but it's also made it hard to connect with people. They don't understand how I perceive things." "I understand," Lucien said quietly. "Immortality creates a similar isolation. You watch the world change, watch humans live and die like mayflies, and eventually you stop trying to connect with them. It's easier to remain apart." "Is that why you've never had a serious relationship in 600 years? "I've had lovers," he admitted. "Vampire and human both. But never a mate. Never someone I could imagine spending eternity with." He turned to her, though she couldn't see the intensity in his gaze. "Never someone who made me question whether eternity was even what I wanted." She reached over, finding his hand as had become her habit. The moment their skin touched, his heart gave that single powerful beat that still startled them both. "Does it hurt?" she asked. "When your heart beats?" "No. It feels like awakening. Like a part of me I thought was dead forever is trying to return to life." Fiona squeezed his hand. "I can hear it when we touch. It's the most beautiful sound I've ever heard." Lucien lifted her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. The gesture was courtly, old-fashioned, but it felt right. Everything about her felt right in a way he had never experienced. "Fiona," he said softly, "I find myself caring for you more each night. This bond between us, whatever it is, I no longer wish to fight it." "I know," she whispered. "I feel it too. When I'm near you, the world makes sense in a way it never has before. Like I've been waiting my whole life to find you, even though I didn't know you existed." He cupped her face gently, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. "May I kiss you?" Instead of answering, she leaned forward, closing the distance between them. Her lips found his with surprising accuracy, and the moment they touched, Lucien's heart began to beat in earnest. Not just one beat, but a steady rhythm that echoed through his chest like thunder. Fiona gasped against his mouth, pulling back slightly. "Your heart, it's really beating." "I know." His voice was rough with emotion he couldn't name. "Don't stop touching me." She kissed him again, deeper this time, and Lucien felt something fundamental shift in his existence. 600 years of death retreated before the warmth of her touch, her breath, her absolute humanity. He had forgotten what it was to feel alive, but she reminded him with every soft sound she made, every movement of her lips against his. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Lucien realized he was breathing. Actually breathing. His lungs pulling in air not because he needed it to speak, but because his body suddenly demanded it. His heart continued its steady rhythm, and he felt warmth spreading through him, chasing away the cold that had lived in his veins for centuries. "What's happening?" Fiona asked, her hands pressed against his chest, feeling the changes. "I don't know," Lucien admitted, wonder coloring his voice. "But I think the bond is activating. I think my body is remembering what it was to be human. Is it permanent?" "I don't know," he said again, then more firmly. "And I don't care. If this is what it means to be bound to you, then I welcome it." Fiona smiled. And in that moment, Lucien Drakenthorn knew he would give up his throne, his power, his immortality itself if it meant seeing that smile every day for whatever time they had together. But the universe, it seemed, had other plans. The attack came 3 nights later, sudden and brutal. Lucien was in a council meeting when the alarms sounded, ancient bells that rang through the undercity warning of invasion. He was on his feet instantly, his body moving before his mind fully processed the threat. "Report," he commanded, and a guard burst into the council chamber, blood streaking his face. "My lord, the northern tunnels have been breached. Vampires from the eastern territories, at least 50 of them. They're fighting their way toward the residential wings." Toward Fiona, Lucien didn't wait to hear more. He was moving, his supernatural speed carrying him through the corridors of the undercity faster than human eyes could follow. Behind him, he heard Cassandra shouting orders, organizing the defense, but his focus was singular. He had to reach Fiona before they did. He burst into her suite to find Victor already there, standing guard over Fiona, who stood by the window, her expression frightened but composed. "My lord," Victor said urgently, "we need to move her to the inner sanctum." "No," came a voice from the doorway, and Lucien turned to see Lord Dimitri enter, followed by a dozen vampire warriors. "She goes nowhere." Betrayal. The word crystallized in Lucien's mind with perfect clarity. Dimitri had orchestrated this, had used the eastern territories as cover for his own play for power. "You dare," Lucien said, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper. I dare much for the good of our kind, Dmitri replied. You've gone soft, Lucien, distracted by a human. You knelt before her, showed weakness before the entire court. You're no longer fit to lead, so you thought to what? Kill her? Use her against me? Neither. Dmitri smiled, cold and cruel. I thought to turn her. Make her one of us. A vampire queen to stand beside you, eliminating the weakness of her mortality while binding you to me through the act. After all, you cannot kill the one who grants your mate immortality without risking her eternal hatred. Lucien felt rage unlike anything he had experienced in centuries. You would violate her choice? Force transformation upon her without consent? I would save our kingdom from a king who has forgotten his purpose. Lucien moved, but Dmitri's warriors were ready. They swarmed him, 6 vampires trying to restrain one, and for a moment the throne room descended into chaos. Lucien fought with the fury of 600 years of combat experience, but even he couldn't defeat a dozen opponents simultaneously. He heard Fiona scream his name, heard Victor's shout of warning, and then Dmitri was there, moving toward Fiona with supernatural speed. No, Lucien roared, and something exploded outward from his chest. Power, raw and ancient, the authority of a king made manifest. The vampires holding him were thrown backward, slamming into walls with bone-crushing force. Dmitri staggered, his advance halted. Lucien stood in the center of the room, and for the first time in 600 years he allowed his full power to surface. The air itself seemed to bend around him, reality warping in response to the will of a vampire king who had just been reminded what it meant to protect what was his. You have forgotten who I am, Lucien said, and his voice carried the weight of centuries. I was not made king because of my age or my political cunning. I was made king because no vampire in Europe could match my strength, my will, or my fury when provoked. He looked at each of Dmitri's warriors in turn. Ask yourselves if you truly wish to die for your lord's ambition. One by one, the vampires backed away, their survival instincts overriding their loyalty. Dmitri stood alone, and now fear entered his expression. You will not touch her, Lucien continued. You will not threaten her. You will not even think her name. He stalked toward Dmitri, each step deliberate. And for your betrayal, for daring to attack what is mine, you will face the oldest of our laws. Lucien, wait, Dmitri began, but Lucien was beyond mercy. Trial by combat, Lucien declared, here and now. You challenged my fitness to rule. Defend yourself or submit to execution. The ancient law was invoked, and by vampire tradition, Dmitri had no choice. He attacked, his centuries of existence lending him speed and strength that would have overpowered any ordinary opponent. But Lucien was no ordinary vampire. He was a king, and more than that, he was a king fighting for his mate. The battle was short and brutal. Lucien had no interest in prolonging Dmitri's suffering, only in ending the threat. Within minutes, the traitorous lord was on his knees, Lucien's hand wrapped around his throat. Any last words? Lucien asked coldly. The others will come, Dmitri gasped. You cannot protect her forever. Watch me. Lucien ended it quickly, and Dmitri crumbled to ash, as all vampires did when truly killed. The warriors who had accompanied him fled, and silence fell over the suite. Lucien turned to find Fiona standing where he had left her, her face pale but composed. Victor hovered nearby, clearly unsure whether to approach his king in the aftermath of such violence. Are you hurt? Lucien asked, crossing to Fiona in 3 long strides. No, I'm fine. Victor protected me. She reached out her hands, finding his chest, checking him for injuries by touch. Are you okay? I heard fighting, things breaking. I'm unharmed. He caught her hands, holding them against his heart. It was still beating, he realized. Even through the violence, the bond had kept his heart alive. But Dmitri was right about one thing. There will be others. As long as you remain mortal and I remain bound to you, you will be a target. Then what do we do? Lucien looked at her, this brave, beautiful woman who had stumbled into his world and changed everything. I give you a choice. I can erase your memories and return you to Boston, to your life. You'll be safe, forgotten by the vampire world. Or, she prompted. Or you accept the bond fully. You become mine and I become yours, whatever that means. We face the consequences together. And if that means you become mortal, Fiona asked. If completing the bond costs you your immortality, then I will live whatever years I have left as a human with you. The words came easily, because Lucien had already made his choice. Somewhere in the past weeks, he had stopped being a king first and had become simply a man who had found his match. Fiona was quiet for a long moment, her fingers pressing against his chest, feeling his heartbeat. Finally, she spoke. I don't want to forget you. I don't want to go back to my old life and wonder why it feels empty. I want this. I want you. Whatever comes next, we face it together. You're certain? I'm terrified, she admitted. But I've never been more certain of anything in my life. Lucien pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. Then we complete the bond. Tonight. How? She asked against his chest. with a choice and a vow. The old texts say that a true mate bond is sealed with intention and blood. You drink from me, I drink from you, and we speak our acceptance before witnesses. He pulled back slightly. It won't turn you vampire. The bond is different from transformation, but it will tie us together irrevocably. Will it hurt? No. I'll make certain of that. Fiona nodded. Then let's do it. Let's finish this. Lucien called for Cassandra and Marcus, the two vampires he trusted most. They arrived within minutes, their expressions solemn as they realized what was about to occur. You're certain of this? Cassandra asked, her usual coldness softened by genuine concern. Once done, it cannot be undone. I'm certain, Lucien said. As am I, Fiona added, her voice steady. They gathered in the center of the suite, Lucien and Fiona facing each other with Cassandra and Marcus as witnesses. Lucien took Fiona's hand, lifting it to his lips. With a thought, he allowed his fangs to extend, then pierced his own wrist, not her skin. The bond requires an exchange of blood freely given, he explained, holding his bleeding wrist to her lips. Drink and accept me as your mate. Fiona didn't hesitate. She brought his wrist to her mouth and drank, and Lucien felt the bond surge between them, strengthening with every drop she took. Power flowed through him, ancient magic activating in response to the ritual. When she had taken enough, he healed his wrist with a thought, then produced a small knife from his pocket. Your turn, don't be afraid. She held out her hand and he made a small, precise cut on her palm. Blood welled, and Lucien brought her hand to his lips, drinking deeply. Her blood was fire on his tongue, life and warmth, and everything he had lost when he died. It burned through him, and his heart responded with a rhythm that grew stronger with each passing second. I accept you, he said, his voice resonant with power. Fiona Sawyer, I claim you as my mate, my equal, my heart made flesh. Before these witnesses and by the power of the old blood, I bind myself to you for whatever time we are granted. Fiona squeezed his hand. I accept you. Lucien Drakenthorn. I claim you as my mate, my protector, my impossible miracle. Before these witnesses and by the power of this bond, I bind myself to you for whatever time we are granted. The words hung in the air for a heartbeat, and then the bond snapped into place with an almost audible click. Lucien gasped as sensations flooded him. He could feel Fiona's emotions as if they were his own, her love, her fear, her absolute certainty. He could sense her heartbeat synchronizing with his, two rhythms becoming one, and then the change began. Warmth spread through Lucien's body, chasing away 600 years of cold. His skin, which had been pale as snow, began to take on color. His hair, stark white, darkened to the deep brown it had been in life. He felt his body shifting, mortality returning in a rush that was both terrifying and exhilarating. Lucien? Fiona asked, concerned. What's happening? Your hand feels different, warmer. I'm becoming human, he said, wonder in his voice. The bond is restoring my mortality. Cassandra made a sound of shock. My lord, your eyes. They're brown again, truly brown like a human's. Marcus stepped forward, his scholarly interest piqued. Incredible. The lore was true. The bond has given you a choice, and you chose her over immortality. But the transformation wasn't complete. Lucien could feel power still coiled inside him, vampire strength that hadn't fully dissipated. He was caught between states, neither fully human nor fully vampire. What does this mean? Fiona asked. It means, came a new voice from the doorway, that you've created something unprecedented. They all turned to see an ancient vampire standing in the entrance, so old that his presence made even Cassandra bow her head in respect. Lucien recognized him immediately. Lord Corvinus, he said, surprise coloring his tone. I did not expect the eldest of our kind to concern himself with my affairs. Corvinus, the first vampire, the origin of their bloodline, stepped into the room with the weight of millennia behind him. His white hair fell past his shoulders, and his eyes held the pale blue of ancient ice. He looked at Lucien and Fiona with an expression of profound interest. A true mate bond has not been successfully completed in over 1,000 years, Corvinus said. Did you think I would not come to witness it? What has happened to him? Cassandra asked. Why is he caught between states? Corvinus approached Lucien, studying him with the intensity of a scholar examining a rare specimen. The bond has given him a choice, as the old magic demands. He may complete his transformation to mortality, living out a human lifespan with his mate. Or he paused, looking at Fiona. She may accept the gift of immortality, joining him in the night eternal. I thought the bond didn't turn humans vampire, Lucien said sharply. It doesn't, not in the traditional sense. Corvinus turned to Fiona. But if you choose it willingly, with full understanding, the bond can grant you immortality without the curse. You would become vampire, yes, but you would retain your humanity in ways that those turned by force never can. You would need blood, yes, but you would not lose yourself to the hunger. You would gain our strength but keep your soul intact. Fiona stood very still, processing this. So Lucien can become human and we can live a normal life together, or I can become a vampire and we can have eternity. Precisely, Corvinus confirmed. And if we choose mortality, Lucien asked, what happens to my throne, my responsibilities? You would abdicate, and another would rise to take your place. Corvinus gestured to Cassandra. Your second in command is more than capable. The kingdom would survive. Lucien looked at Cassandra, who stood straight despite the obvious turmoil in her expression. I would serve honorably, she said quietly. Though I would mourn your departure, what would you choose? Fiona asked, turning to Lucien. If it were entirely up to you? Lucien took her hands, thinking carefully. A week ago, I would have said immortality without hesitation. But now? He shook his head. Now I find myself drawn to the idea of a simple life. Mortality, humanity, the chance to live and love and eventually rest. I have been king for 600 years. Perhaps it is time to be simply a man. But, Fiona prompted, hearing the hesitation in his voice. But I am selfish enough to want more than a handful of decades with you. I want centuries. I want forever. He cupped her face gently. The choice is yours, Fiona. I will accept whatever you decide. Mortality or immortality, a short life or an eternal one, I am yours regardless. Fiona was quiet for a long moment, her sightless eyes distant as she considered. Finally, she spoke. I've spent my whole life being different, being set apart. I thought I wanted to be normal, to fit in, but maybe that was never meant to be my path. She tightened her grip on Lucien's hands. You gave up everything for me, your immortality, your certainty, your entire existence. The least I can do is meet you halfway. You want to become vampire? Lucien asked, needing to be certain. I want to be with you, she corrected. And if that means becoming something more than human, then yes. I choose immortality. I choose forever with you. Are you certain? Corvinus asked, his ancient voice gentle. This choice cannot be unmade. I'm certain, Fiona said firmly. I choose this. I choose him. Corvinus nodded slowly. Then so it shall be. Lucien, the transformation is simple. You must drink her blood again, and she must drink yours. But this time with the intention of granting immortality. The bond will do the rest. Lucien felt his fangs extend again, the vampire part of him responding to the ritual. He looked at Fiona, giving her one last chance to back out. Tell me to stop and I will. No matter what, don't stop, she whispered. I love you, Lucien. I want this life with you, whatever it looks like. I love you too, he said, the words feeling both strange and absolutely right. I have walked this earth for 6 centuries and you are the only thing that has ever made me feel alive. He pulled her close, his lips finding the pulse point at her neck. This will hurt for only a moment, he whispered against her skin, and then you will be reborn. His fangs pierced her throat gently and he drank, feeling her blood strengthen the bond between them. At the same time, he reopened the wound on his wrist, pressing it to her lips. She drank even as he did, and the magic of the bond activated fully, power exploded between them. The old magic recognizing the completion of the transformation. Fiona gasped against his wrist and Lucien felt her mortality draining away, replaced by something stronger, more enduring. Her heartbeat slowed, matching his, and then together their hearts stopped. For a moment they hung suspended between life and death, and then they opened their eyes simultaneously, vampire and mate, bound together for eternity. Fiona blinked and Lucien realized immediately what had changed. Can you see? He asked urgently. She stared at him, her eyes now the pale silver of a vampire wide with wonder. I can see you, she whispered. Lucien, I can see you. You're beautiful. Tears, blood tears, the only kind vampires could shed, tracked down her cheeks, and Lucien wiped them away gently. The transformation healed your blindness. I can see everything, she said, turning to take in the room. Colors, shapes, your faces. She looked at Cassandra and Marcus, then at Corvinus. The world is so bright. It will take time to adjust, Corvinus said kindly. But you are no longer blind and you are no longer mortal. The bond has made you vampire. But you retain your humanity in ways that matter. Treasure that gift. It is rare indeed. He turned to Lucien. And you, young king, have regained your immortality through the bond. You are vampire once more, but changed. Your heart beats when you are near your mate. You feel emotions with human depth. You are something new, something that has not existed before. What does that mean for my throne? Lucien asked. That is for you to decide, Corvinus said. You could rule with your mate by your side, ushering in a new era for our kind. Or you could step down and explore this new existence together. The choice, as always, is yours. Lucien looked at Fiona, who was still marveling at her ability to see. He looked at Cassandra and Marcus, his loyal friends and advisors. He thought about his throne, his kingdom, the weight of 6 centuries of responsibility. I choose her, he said simply. I will abdicate. Let Cassandra rule. I have been king long enough. Cassandra's eyes widened. My lord, are you certain? I have never been more certain of anything. He pulled Fiona close, his heart beating steadily in his chest. I have spent 600 years as a king. I would like to spend the next 600 simply being her mate. Then it is decided, Corvinus said with a note of satisfaction. Cassandra, you are hereby declared Queen of the Central European territories. Rule wisely. He turned back to Lucien and Fiona. And you two go. Find your happiness wherever it may lead. You have earned it. The transition of power took 3 days to formalize. Lucien spent the time teaching Fiona how to be vampire, how to control her new strength, how to feed without killing. She adapted with remarkable speed, her intelligence and determination serving her well. On the 4th day they left Prague together, leaving the Undercity behind. Lucien had arranged for a home in the countryside, a place where they could learn to be together without the weight of the vampire court watching their every move. They arrived at sunset, the sky painted in shades of orange and pink. Fiona stood in the garden, turning slowly to take in every detail with her new sight. It's beautiful, she said softly. I never imagined the world looked like this. Lucien came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. It's more beautiful with you in it. She leaned back against him and he felt his heart respond with its steady rhythm. What do we do now? She asked. Whatever we want, he said simply. We have eternity to figure it out. Fiona turned in his arms, looking up at him with her silver vampire eyes that could finally see. I love you, she said. My vampire king who knelt for me. I would kneel for you again, Lucien replied, and even as he spoke, he lowered himself to one knee, looking up at her with absolute devotion. I would kneel every day for the rest of eternity if it pleased you. Stand up, she said, laughing through blood tears. Stand up and kiss me, you ridiculous man. He rose and captured her lips with his, and in that moment Lucien Drakenthorn knew perfect happiness. He had been a warlord, a king, an immortal predator. He had commanded armies and ruled territories. He had lived for 600 years and seen the world transform beyond recognition. But none of it mattered compared to this. Holding his mate in his arms, feeling his heart beat in time with hers, knowing they would face eternity together. Thank you, he whispered against her lips. For what? For stumbling into my throne room. For hearing my heartbeat when no one else could. For choosing me, even when it meant giving up your mortality. Fiona smiled, that same smile that had captivated him from the beginning. I didn't give up anything, I gained everything. I gained you, I gained sight, I gained forever. That's not a sacrifice, that's a gift. They stood together in the garden as night fell completely, two vampires bound by a love that had transcended death itself. The world continued to turn, kingdoms rose and fell, but none of it touched them in their small corner of eternity. Years passed, then decades. They traveled the world together, experiencing everything from the heights of modern cities to the depths of ancient ruins. Fiona learned to paint, capturing the world she had never been able to see before. Lucien learned to let go of the need for power and control, finding peace in simply being rather than ruling. They visited Boston once, 10 years after Fiona's transformation. She said goodbye to her old life, arranged her affairs, and fabricated a story about moving to Europe permanently. Her father was sad but understanding, and Fiona promised to visit when she could. Do you miss it? Lucien asked as they left the city behind. Your old life? Sometimes, Fiona admitted. I miss the simplicity of it, but I wouldn't trade what we have for anything. They returned to their home in the countryside, to the garden where Fiona had first seen the sunset. Over time, they filled it with night-blooming flowers, creating a sanctuary of beauty that reflected their bond. Cassandra ruled well, transforming the vampire courts into something more modern and just. She visited occasionally, bringing news from the Undercity, but she never asked Lucien to return to power. She understood that he had found something more valuable than a throne. Marcus compiled their story into the ancient texts, documenting the first successful true mate bond in a millennium. Scholars came from around the world to study the phenomenon, but Lucien and Fiona rarely granted audiences. They preferred their privacy, their quiet existence together. One night, exactly 100 years after they had met, Lucien and Fiona stood in their garden beneath a full moon. Fiona had painted a mural on the garden wall, depicting the throne room where they had first encountered each other. Can you believe it's been a century? She asked, looking at the painting. It feels like both a moment and an eternity, Lucien replied. He came to stand beside her, taking her hand as he always did. His heart beat steadily, a constant rhythm that had never faltered in all their years together. Do you ever regret it? Fiona asked. Giving up your throne? Never, Lucien said immediately. I was king for 600 years and I cannot remember a single moment of joy that compares to even the simplest day with you. Fiona squeezed his hand. I feel the same way. Thank you for kneeling for me all those years ago. Thank you for showing me that even a king can choose love over power. I would do it again in a heartbeat, Lucien said, and then he smiled at his own words, literally. She laughed, the sound filling the garden with warmth. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the moon rise higher in the sky, secure in the knowledge that they had countless nights like this ahead of them. Somewhere in Prague, in the undercity beneath the modern streets, the court of vampires continued without them. But here, in a garden full of night-blooming flowers, a former king and his mate had found something more precious than any throne. They had found forever. And it had all begun with a blind woman who heard what no one else could, a heartbeat in the chest of a vampire who had not knelt in 600 years. That heartbeat had changed everything, had rewritten the fate of two souls who were always meant to find each other. As the years continued to pass, their love only deepened. They learned that true mate bonds were not just about passion or attraction, but about growing together, supporting each other, becoming more than either could be alone. Lucien taught Fiona about vampire history and politics. Fiona taught Lucien about art and music and the beauty of experiencing the world with fresh eyes. They made friends among both vampires and humans, carefully maintaining the masquerade that protected their kind. They witnessed the birth of new technologies, new art movements, new ways of thinking. But through it all, they remained constant to each other. On their 200th anniversary, Fiona created a sculpture garden behind their home, filling it with pieces that represented moments from their life together. There was a sculpture of the throne room, of the moment Lucien had knelt. Another depicted the garden where they had shared their first kiss. A third showed them standing together, her hand over his heart, his arms wrapped around her. "It's our story," she explained as Lucien walked through the garden, examining each piece with wonder. "Everything that matters preserved in stone and metal. It's beautiful," he said, pulling her into his arms. "You're beautiful, and I am the luckiest vampire who has ever existed." "We're both lucky," Fiona corrected. "We found each other against impossible odds. We chose each other when we could have walked away. That's not luck, that's destiny." Lucien kissed her temple, his heart beating its steady rhythm. "Destiny, then. I can accept that." They stood together in the sculpture garden as another night deepened around them, two immortals who had chosen love over everything else. The world continued to change, but their bond remained eternal, unbreakable, the one constant in an ever-shifting universe. And somewhere, in the ancient texts kept in the vampire archives, scholars would read about them for centuries to come, about the king who knelt for a blind woman, about the bond that restored a heartbeat to the dead, about a love that transcended death, mortality, and time itself. But Lucien and Fiona didn't think about their legacy. They thought only of each other, of the next night and the night after that, of the eternity stretched out before them like a gift. The Vampire King had not knelt in 600 years, but when he did, when he lowered himself before the woman who heard his impossible heartbeat, he found something worth more than any crown or throne. He found home. He found love. He found forever. And in the end, that was all that mattered.